Hi everyone, and welcome to this month's What's New with AdX training. It's Asha here, your AdX trainer. I'm joined today with AdX product managers George and Haskell and AdX product specialist Alec on the call, and they'll be introducing an exciting set of features for us today. So let's go ahead and take a look at the agenda. So here's what we'll be covering today. We'll be covering the sunset of the old user interface and the old API. We'll be going through hosted bidding, user lists, MRAID 2, skippable correction for video ads, enhancements to RTB Breakout, multi-account logins, and a new budget field in Pretargeting. And as always, we'll be holding a Q&A towards the end of the training, so please do submit your questions via the question and answer panel. For anyone new to Hangouts on Air, this is located in the left-hand navigation panel. As always, if you wanted to watch this training again, a recording of the event will be made available on the Google Plus training page and the AdExchange Help Center. Okay, so let's begin today, and I'm going to pass it over to Product Manager George, who will be taking us through the first 3 features on today's agenda.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Asha. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Cool. So if we go on to 2 slides forward, so AdX has 2 separate UIs and 2 separate APIs, and it's been this way for a while. When AdX was originally created, most campaigns were trafficked directly in the UI. There was no RTB, and so the UI and the API for solving this need was a lot like the AdWords UI. And so our old UI looks a lot like the AdWords UI. But over the past couple of years, the entire exchange has shifted to be primarily RTB. At this point, the vast majority of buying happens via RTB. And there are some very different needs that buyers and bidders have when it comes to RTB. So, for example, many of the tools that we've been launching over the past year, things like RTB Breakout, bidder debugging, Creative Explorer, are really crucial for RTB buying, even if they're not necessarily relevant in a world where you book creatives directly. And so as we've built out more RTB-specific functionality, we found that almost everything our buyers need exists within our new UI, and having 2 separate UIs caused a bit of confusion. So what we've been doing is pulling over all crucial functionality into our new UI, and we're going to deprecate access to the old UI, so that going forward, buyers will have a single UI rather than 2. And then the same thing for the API. We've pulled over the most crucial functionality, and we're going to deprecate AdX buyer access to the old UI for the same reason, to streamline, to simplify, and so that it's not as confusing for buyers to have to figure out what's in what UI and how to get things done in each of the different UIs. So at this point, the majority of buyers have been moved to read-only access on the old UI and the old API. Some folks still have read-write access to the old UI and the old API. The remaining accounts who still have that read-write access will have it revoked in January. So by the end of January, all accounts will no longer be able to make edits via the old UI or the old API, and then we'll be actually deprecating access where you'll no longer be able to log in. You'll automatically get redirected to our new UI, and you'll get an access error on the old API. So we don't expect that this should have a major impact on most buyers. Again, the vast majority of buyers are spending most of their money via RTB, and all the core RTB functionalities in the new UI and the new API. But for folks who are familiar with the old UI and the old API and who currently use it, just be aware that those are going away, and that starting either a few weeks ago or in January, depending on which set of accounts you're in, you no longer have read-write access to those old interfaces. So if we go to the next slide, most people are probably familiar with this, but obviously one of the core aspects of the new UI when we rolled it out is Marketplace, and we're continuing to invest very heavily in Marketplace and deals and all the core RTB functionality. This is just an example of something that wasn't as natural to put in an AdWords style UI where you book campaigns directly into the UI, and one of the reasons why we felt that the new UI was a better experience overall. But everything that you're used to in the new UI, we're going to continue to invest in more heavily than before. And if there's key functionality that you feel is missing or would like to see added, please let us know, because we're always looking to get that sort of input. On the next slide, again, for the API, there's the SOAP API, which is our old API, and the REST API, which is our new API. And pretty much all crucial functionality has been migrated over to the REST API. So things like pre-targeting you can do with the REST API. And we're adding a lot of new stuff to the REST API, like support for deals and marketplace functionality. There are some types of functionality that are available in the old API that we are not currently supporting in the new API, but nothing crucial that impacts most buyers. There are a handful of buyers who are using the SOAP API for some edge cases that are not core to the exchange. And so there are a handful of use cases that we're not currently supporting in the REST API. If you are currently using the REST API, please reach out to your account team if you haven't already talked with them about this. But just be aware that this will be moving to read-only access already or very soon, and then fully deprecated in early 2016. And I think, as always, feel free to submit comments. I think there's a lag time between when you submit comments and when Asha has them, so we can probably get to questions towards the end. But if you do have questions, either submit them here, or in many cases, if you're using the SOAP API, it's probably better to talk directly with your account team, and we can schedule a separate one-on-one to discuss specific needs on your specific account, because there's a lot of variation among buyers. So hosted bidding. So as I mentioned, most spend on the exchange is RTB, but not all spend is RTB. And there are still some buyers who find value in being able to book campaigns directly, even though it's typically not a driver of a lot of spend. It's not a core piece of what our buyers do. There are some key use cases. A lot of them revolve around testing and debugging, especially for new bidders who aren't familiar with buying on AdX, who just want to see what kind of reach they can get, what kind of targeting options we offer, and play around a bit before actually building out bidder support. And as sort of a example implementation, we're going to maintain some of this functionality to support those use cases. Also, there's some useful functionality if you want to spend in a different geography. Maybe you're primarily spending in Europe, but you have a single advertiser who wants to run a campaign on the West Coast, and you don't want to invest in the resources to set up a separate bidder on our West Coast trading location. You can use non-RTB buying to really quickly book a campaign without having to set up a separate bidder at a separate trading location. So there's some use cases for this, and so we're going to continue to support this. Hosted bidding is essentially the new flow for non-RTB campaigns within our new UI. So the old UI is going away, and this is essentially how you should be creating any non-RTB campaigns going forward. And we're going to walk through a handful of screenshots just to show you what it looks like. At this point, all accounts should have access to this. So on the top nav, you'll see something that's called hosted bidding. And when you get to this page, you'll see a list of your existing bids with some summary data. You'll also notice on the right, you can click into Query Tool if you want really detailed reporting. But within this page, you can get access to some summary data. There's an expandable table where you click on any of these rows, and you can see some details specific to that hosted bid. If you want to create a new hosted bid, there's a three-part flow. So if you go to the next slide, the first part of creating a hosted bid is specifying some really basic settings. So what is it called? What are the start and end dates? It's possible to have it be ongoing, so the end date is optional. You need to set a budget, max CPM, pacing options, which mirror the options that were available in our old UI. And then you can optionally set some additional settings like ad scheduling. If you only want, for instance, your campaign to run between certain hours of the day as opposed to 24 hours a day. You can set some of that here. And then on the next page is where we get to most of the targeting parameters. So if we go to targeting, you'll see that there are a bunch of targeting parameters that we support, and this mirrors a lot of what's already available in pre-targeting for those who are doing RTB. You can target user lists that are on your account, languages, sites, apps, app category, mobile operating system, channels, verticals, and geography. It's important to note that this does not fully replicate everything you can do on our old UI, but it does replicate the vast majority of use cases. So what we did was we looked at what people were using in the old UI, and we basically rebuilt the targeting functionality that was being used by the vast majority of buyers. And there's a handful of targeting options that were edge cases only used by one or two folks, and we just decided that because they were edge cases, they weren't core to support. So you may find that some of the targeting options are a little bit different here than what you may be used to if you used to run a lot of non-RTB campaigns. And then finally, on the third step, after you've specified your settings and your targeting, you can add creatives or use creatives that are already on your account. And this replicates sort of the experience in the old UI, where you basically give us a 3-pass location. So if you go to the next page, for display, you give us a 3-pass location, and then you have to mark some settings, such as the ad size, any vendors that are being used in the creative, things like MRAID, SSL, and data use. And then there's a slightly separate version of this for video. If you go to the next slide, some of the other direction. So slightly different set of things that you need to specify for video. Again, this mirrors how you would create a new creative in the old UI. So finally, on the next tab, going forward, any non-RTB campaigns that you want to traffic directly in the UI should be done via this new flow, hosted bidding. You should not do anything in the old UI. You're not able to if you've already been migrated, and the handful of folks who still have read-write access to the old UI. You can create new campaigns in the old UI, but we recommend not doing it because those are all going to be shut down in January. When we move, anyone who has existing non-RTB campaigns in the old UI, when we move your campaign, your account to read-only access to the old UI in January, we're going to automatically terminate any non-RTB campaigns that are in that old UI that are not being managed by hosted bidding. So if you have non-RTB campaigns that you want to continue to run, please migrate those over now. We're not going to be doing this automatically because there's some targeting and budgeting differences that we think that you should set yourself. But use the new UI to create any non-RTB campaigns you want to preserve, and then manually pause any existing non-RTB campaigns in the old UI. By the end of January, there will be no more non-RTB campaigns managed in the old UI. Everything will be managed via hosted bidding, and anything still on the old UI will be automatically terminated when your account moves to read-only. So if you want those campaigns to continue running, please look at this new flow and get comfortable with it now. If you have questions, reach out to your account team, and we can spend some time explaining it to you and helping you understand some of the differences and how to go about targeting things in the new UI. And the targeting mirrors how pre-targeting works. So when you see that targeting widget, the logic being applied here is pretty much the same that's being applied with pre-targeting, which most folks are already familiar with. So that's it for hosted bidding. Next, user list. This is one of the last key pieces of functionality that was available in the old UI that we heard a lot of demand for. And so we have rebuilt functionality for managing user lists within the new UI so that you can continue to do that even after the old UI is deprecated. There are a number of reasons why you might want to do this. You may have a very particular audience that you want to reach, and you can use these lists for targeting with pre-targeting. Maybe you only want to receive RTB callouts for users who are on a certain list, or maybe you want to receive callouts for all users, but you just want to inspect which user list the user's on. So you just want to have your bidder look for a given user list within the callout, you can do that. Or alternatively, you can target these user lists using hosted bidding, which we just discussed. And then in the future, there may be some functionality within Marketplace around user lists. So you can already, for instance, do some inventory discovery, some forecasting based on user list. If you have a given user list and you want to see which sites those users can be found on, you can already do this with an inventory discovery. And there's some additional functionality related to user lists that we'll probably bake into Marketplace. So there are a number of different reasons why you might want to create or manage user lists. And the UI that I'll show you briefly is basically just to enable you to manage those user lists. On the next slide, so underneath bidding, so just to clarify, this is currently in beta. Not everyone has access to this today. I think we have ballpark about 100 accounts who currently have access to it on the beta, and we're increasing, we're adding more accounts every week. And we expect that probably around the end of Q4, this will be GA and everyone will have access. If you want access to it now and you don't have access, let your account team know and we'll add you to the beta. But everyone should have access to this by the end of Q4 if you don't already have access. Underneath the bidding tab, there's a new entry called user lists. And essentially it's just a table where you can see all of your user lists and some key pieces of data like membership duration, the status of the user list, whether it's open or closed, the number of cookies who are on the user list. And in addition to being able to see your user list, you can also create a new user list and get your remarketing tag. So if you want to create a new user list, there's a button, and basically you input a bunch of parameters. You give it a name, set duration. There's some rules around how the user list is defined. It's important to notice that there's an old type of user list and a new type of user list. So it used to be that you'd have a separate tag for every different user list. So folks who've had user lists that have been around for a while may know that previously you'd set up a user list and every single user list would have its separate tag, and then you'd have to put that tag on each page where you want the user list to be used. The new way of creating user lists, which we've had for quite a while, there's just a single tag for your account. So all you have is one tag, you can put it everywhere, and then you define the user list by specifying some rules. So you can put this one tag everywhere, and then you can define user list XYZ by saying anytime that tag gets called and the user is on page www.xyz.com or whatever the domain is. So there are different types of rules, but that's what that's for. Then once you've created a user list, you'll see it reflected in the table. You can also get your remarketing tag. So get remarketing tag will give you the single tag for your entire account. You can put this anywhere you want, and then basically every time that's called, we keep track of it, and you can define your user list to be a subset of the instances where this tag gets called. So this is live for some folks. It'll be live for everyone by the end of Q4. Let us know if you have questions, and we can help you get started if you want to learn more about how to use this. So I'll turn it over to Haskell, I think, or Emre too.
Yeah, thanks, George. So over to Haskell now, and he's going to take us through Emre 2 and skippable correction for video ads.
Cool, thank you, Asha, and hello, everyone. Starting with Emre 2, a lot of you are probably familiar with this, and it's the most recent standard for MRAID provided by the IAB. And this has been supported by the Google Mobile Ads SDK for several months now, and it's now officially supported for all AdX buyers as well. A little bit of background about what MRAID 2 entails. It's the next version of MRAID from the IAB and kind of an upgrade from version 1. And it provides a bit more control for creatives to interact with the SDK and have kind of interesting creative executions. So for example, there are new methods for resize and expand that allow creatives to resize based on user interactions or to expand to full screen, or to allow for interesting things like dismissing creatives via swipe instead of via the standard X that you'd have on an ad in a mobile app environment. It also allows for the creative JavaScript to query the device for certain capabilities like the screen size or the position of the ad slot at the time to make decisions about exactly how the ad should interact with the user. And it provides a new way to handle video consistently if you don't use Vast XML for your video. So as an alternative to Vast, you can now use MRAID video, with the caveat that we recommend that you continue to look for the video message in the bid request if you're going to use MRAID to put video into your creatives. Finally, MRAID provides some new click interactions, for example, add to calendar or add to images with the user's consent. So you would click on the creative, it would ask the user if they are comfortable with this action, and if so, those capabilities are supplied by MRAID as well. In terms of what this means for you as a bidder, if you already are using MRAID 1 ads today, there shouldn't be any bidder changes at all. We'll continue to, whether it's MRAID 1 or MRAID 2, we've broadly classified this just as support for MRAID. In the bid request, you'll see if excluded attribute 32 is included as an excluded creative attribute, then it doesn't support MRAID. Otherwise, you're free to use MRAID. And likewise, you as a bidder then need to declare that the ad uses MRAID using attribute 32. But you don't need to distinguish between MRAID 1 and MRAID 2. It's just all ads that use MRAID are broadly classified with that creative attribute. In the future, we'll actually look at automatically detecting MRAID and doing this declaration on behalf of bidders, so you don't even need to do that. But for right now in this version, you still do need to declare if you as a bidder are using MRAID. Cool, let's keep going. Next up, we have a section on skippable correction for video ads. And for those of you who are already bidding on video, you probably know that most of our video ads require skippable for user experience. And then there are some ads that actually require non-skippable, for example, in OTT and connected TV environments most commonly. And this can pose problems for bidders because if an ad needs to be skippable and you don't add the skippable extension in your Vast XML, you'll be filtered out of the auction. And likewise, if an ad spot requires non-skippable and the skippable extension is included in your Vast XML, you'll also be filtered out of the auction. We now provide an opt-in option called skippable correction, which makes this a lot easier. If you as a bidder or a buyer opt into this setting, we'll take care of this skippable logic for you. So if you get an ad request and it requires skippable and you've opted in, then we'll make sure that your Vast XML is skippable whether you've added that or not. Likewise, if the ad request requires non-skippable, we'll make sure to remove the skip function for you. But this is an opt-in feature. So if you look on the next slide, you need to go to your account settings, and then you click Edit on Account Settings. And then you'll have an option with a checkbox that says Enable Skippable Correction. If you check this off at the buyer level, then for every single bid response that you send in with Vast XML, we'll handle this skippable correction for you, and you no longer need to worry about checking for the status of skippability in the bid request. So we're really excited about this. We hope this will make it much easier to handle the different possibilities of requires skippable, requires non-skippable, and you can just focus on delivering video ads.
Nice, thanks Haskell. Okay, so just a reminder before we move on to our last section, if anyone has any questions, please do submit them by the question and answer panel towards the left-hand navigation, or we'll save them to the end. Okay, so we're going to move on to our last section. So I'm going to pass it over to our product specialist, Alec, who will be walking us through the last 3 features on the agenda today.
Thanks, Asha. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, perfectly.
Beautiful. All right, so the first item that I wanted to talk through was an enhancement that we're making to RTB Breakout. So as a reminder, RTB Breakout is a tool in the AdX UI that allows you to see an overview of your real-time bidding activity and a detailed breakout of your filtered bids. It's available within your AdX UI and has been for several months. If you log in and then click on the bidding tab, it'll be the first page that you see by default. And we're constantly making enhancements to the RTB Breakout tool just to make it a better and more useful experience for all of our clients. And the most recent enhancement that we've just released is a new filter for format. So this format filter allows you to view your RTB Breakout stats based on either display or video. So if you want to look specifically at how many filtered bids you're seeing on your display buying versus video buying, or the top error reasons or filtering reasons have been for display versus video, you can do that now using the format filter. This is really useful because oftentimes the filtering reasons can differ between your video buying and your display buying, and it allows you to really drill in on a particular type of buying that you're doing. And we'll, on the next slide, show a quick screenshot of what that looks like. I did want to quickly mention that another filter we're going to be adding to the RTB Breakout tool very soon is the platform filter. And again, this will be an additional filter within the same dropdown in RTB Breakout that will allow you to view RTB Breakout stats segmented by desktop or mobile web or mobile app. That way you can just, again, drill down on more granular detail on a particular platform that you're buying on. So we can go to the next slide, please, Asha. So here's a quick screenshot of where this filter is. So once you log into your AdX account, click on the bidding tab, you should be taken to RTB Breakout page by default. At the very top of the page, where you usually see the filter dropdown, you go ahead and click in there. You'll see format has now been added in between Creative ID and Publisher. And once you click format, you'll be able to select between display and video. And that'll automatically update the data you see within RTB Breakout below. And this is also where we're going to add that platform filter that I was just referring to. So it'll be a new filter listed in this dropdown of filter options. All right, the second topic that I wanted to walk through was around account logins. So previously with account logins, we used to allow only a Google login to be associated with only one AdX account. So we had it restricted to this one-to-one relationship between your login and access to an AdX account. And if you skip to the next slide, please. Some great news, since we knew that was a big restriction because a lot of you actually use several AdX accounts. We have made it possible for an individual Google login to be associated with more than one AdX account now. So users with multiple accounts can easily switch between AdX accounts within the AdX UI. So we've made this as easy as possible for you to switch back and forth between all the various AdX accounts that you have access to through the same Google login. So you no longer need to create an additional or new Google login for each AdX account that you want to have access to. And you can do this easily within the UI. Once you've signed in, you look for either your email address or your customer ID at the top of your AdX account, regardless of which page you're on within the UI. And once you click on that email address or customer ID, you'll see a drop-down that contains all of the AdX accounts that you are associated with, and you can easily select which account you want access to at that moment. And then you can, if you want to switch back, you can use that drop-down again to switch back to any other account that you were logged into. So it should make it much easier for you to access and switch between whichever accounts you have access to through your one login. And the last feature that we wanted to discuss today was a new budget field setting that we've added to pre-targeting config settings in the AdX UI. So in the original or old AdX UI that George was referring to earlier that we're deprecating access to, you were able to set a daily budget at the campaign level to cap your daily spend per campaign so that your daily spend wouldn't exceed whatever max amount you set there with your daily budget max. So we wanted to bring the same kind of functionality over to the new AdX UI so that you can cap your daily spend per pre-targeting configuration and not spend more than you would like to within a given day. So you'll see this now. This will appear at the upper right corner of every single pre-targeting config that you have within the AdX UI. Any previously existing pre-targeting config, we automatically ported over the budget settings that you had already set up in your campaigns from the older AdX UI. So that's what you'll see there today. You can go in and edit those at any time and save your pre-targeting settings if you do want to update your daily budget cap for a particular pre-targeting config. And when you're creating a new pre-targeting config in the AdX UI moving forward, the daily budget setting will be a required field. So whenever you are going through the process of adding a new pre-targeting configuration, daily budget is required. And again, this is just so that you can have a bit more control as to how much you're spending within each pre-targeting config, so that if you're setting up, say, buying in a new region or new geo, or you're testing out a new format or type of buying, like video, for example, and you want to start off with just a small test, you can easily cap the daily budget that way. And that was everything that I wanted to walk through. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Alec. Okay, so we covered a lot of features today, and remember, you can watch the recording back at any time via the Google Plus training page. So that's the same place you went to attend the webinar today. So we're going to move over to the question and answers now. So I'll just give a minute or so for everyone to submit their questions if you had any. And while you do that, let me just go over a couple of resources. So you can access the AdX via Academy, and you can find all of our previous trainings, historical trainings on SSL, mobile, and new feature release trainings. We also have our short training videos as well, so you can access them via the AdX via Academy. Alternatively, you can access it via the training YouTube page. And furthermore, on the Academy, you can get certified, you can access learning paths, and you can also access our AdX playbook, which is an up-to-date version of all things to do with AdX for anyone who's ramping up or wanting a refresher. And it also contains critical updates as well to the product. Okay, so just going to look to the Q&A panel to check if we had any questions. And we didn't have any questions. So, okay, so I think everything was really clear and nothing too complex. So I think everyone's understood everything that was presented today. So yeah, again, thanks as always to everyone who joined the training today, and hopefully we'll see you again on a future What's New with AdX training. Our next one will be focused on real-time bidding, so our updates on that. So again, thank you so much to George, Haskell, and Alec for presenting today, and see you on a future training.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.